The champagne glasses trembled on Sophie Lane's tray long before anyone noticed her hands. The Aurelia room glittered above Manhattan like a jewel box built for people who had never once worried about rent, grief, or how much dignity a person could swallow before it started poisoning them from the inside. Crystal chandeliers poured gold light over white roses, silk tablecloths, and towers of champagne. Outside the windows, the city shimmered cold and bright below. But inside, everything smelled like money, perfume, and celebration. Sophie stood near the private dining room doors in a black waitress uniform that pinched slightly at her waist. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her lipstick had been reapplied twice in the employee bathroom. Her name tag sat crooked over her heart. She had told herself she could survive one night, just one dinner, just one room full of people who did not know that the groom-to-be had once promised her a kitchen full of sunlight, a little house upstate, and forever. Then Daniel Whitmore lifted his champagne flute and smiled directly at her. "Sophie," he called, his voice smooth enough to sound innocent to anyone who did not know where he kept his knives. "Be careful with that tray. We all remember how nervous you get around expensive things." A few guests laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly enough to seem vulgar, just enough. Sophie's fingers tightened beneath the silver tray. 8 champagne glasses sparkled under the chandelier light. She could see her reflection in them round cheeks, tired eyes. A woman trying not to break in public. Daniel sat at the center of the long table in a navy dinner jacket. His golden hair, perfect. His smile practiced. Beside him, his fiancée, Margot Vale, leaned against his shoulder like she had been poured there by a designer. Her diamond necklace sat against her collarbone like frost. Margot looked Sophie up and down. "So this is her?" she asked. Loud enough for the table. The waitress Daniel chuckled and placed one hand over Margot's cess. "My past has always had a flair for drama." Sophie moved forward because she was working. Because the manager had warned her that refusing this private event would mean losing her job. Because Daniel had specifically requested her for the room. And somehow the restaurant had obeyed. Because powerful men did not need to raise their voices to make ordinary women bleed, she poured champagne for Margot first. The glass filled with pale gold bubbles. Margot did not say thank you. Instead, she tilted her head, smiling with her eyes full of poison. "Daniel told me you used to dream about marrying him." Margot said, "That must be hard. Serving the dinner instead of sitting at it." The table went quiet for half a second. Then someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another woman covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Sophie felt the tray shift. She steadied it. "I am here to do my job," she said softly. Daniel's smile sharpened. "That's right. And you were always good at serving people. Weren't you?" The words struck deeper than they should have. Not because they were clever. They were not. But because he knew exactly where to place them. Sophie poured his champagne last. Daniel leaned close as she did. "You should smile," he murmured. "People will think you rebitter." Her hand shook. One drop of champagne slipped over the rim of his glass and landed on the white tablecloth. Margot gasped as if Sophie had spilled blood. Daniel looked down at the tiny wet spot, then back up at her. The room held its breath, hungry for her humiliation. And that was when the man at the far end of the table finally moved. Until then, Vincent Romano had been nothing more than a shadow seated among rich men pretending not to fear him. He wore a black suit with no tie. His dark hair was combed back, his jaw clean-shaven. His eyes so still, they made the room feel colder. There was nothing loud about him. No jewelry except a watch. No smile. No wasted motion. Yet every guest had been aware of him from the moment he entered. Vincent Romano did not belong to society. Society belonged to men who hoped he would never become their enemy. Sophie had noticed him when she first walked in because the air around him seemed different. He had not laughed. He had not whispered. He had not looked at Margot's diamonds or Daniel's performance. He had watched Sophia's hands. Now Vincent set down his untouched glass. The sound was soft. Everyone heard it. Daniel's smile flickered. Vincent turned his gaze to him. "Did you ask for her to serve this table?" Daniel hesitated. "Excuse me, Vincent." His voice remained calm. It was a simple question. The manager, standing near the wall, suddenly looked pale. Daniel lifted his shoulders in a careless shrug. "I may have mentioned Sophie used to work private events well. We know each other." "No," Vincent said. "You know how to hurt her." The silence changed shape. Sophie forgot to breathe. Margot laughed once, brittle and offended. "Mr. Romano, I'm sure you don't understand the history here." Vincent did not look at her. He reached to the empty chair beside him, gripped the back, and pulled it out slowly. The chair legs whispered over the marble floor. Then he looked at Sophie. "Miss Lane," he said, "you are done serving people who never deserved you." Sophie stared at him. Every face turned toward her. Her tray suddenly felt too heavy, her body too visible, her shame too public. Daniel's jaw tightened. Margot's painted mouth opened in disbelief. Vincent's eyes did not leave Sophie's face. "Sit beside me." The words were not loud. They landed like a gunshot. Sophie should have refused. She should have remembered that men like Vincent Romano did not rescue women out of kindness. She should have backed away, returned to the kitchen, and protected what little remained of her life. Instead, she looked at Daniel. For 2 years, she had loved a man who made her feel lucky to be chosen. Then he had cheated on her with a woman whose family could fund his ambitions. Left Sophie with unpaid bills from the catering business they had started together, and told everyone she was too emotional to be trusted. Now he sat in front of her with his new fiancée, asking her to pour champagne over the grave of her own heart. Sophie lowered the tray onto a side table. Her knees almost failed her as she walked to Vincent Romano's side. Vincent waited until she reached the chair. He did not touch her. He did not guide her with his hand at her back. He only stood there, still and dangerous, giving the room no permission to laugh. Sophie sat. Something passed through the guests like electricity. Daniel leaned forward. "This is inappropriate." Vincent sat beside Sophie and finally picked up his champagne glass. "No," he said. "What you did was inappropriate." Margot's cheeks flushed. "She is staff." Vincent turned his eyes to her. For the first time all evening, Margot went silent. "She is a woman," he said. "Speak carefully." Sophie felt heat rise behind her eyes, and she hated herself for it. She did not want to cry in front of Daniel. She did not want Vincent Romano, of all men, to see how deeply those small cruelties had cut. So she folded her hands in her lap and stared straight ahead. Vincent noticed anyway. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You don't owe this room your tears." Sophie swallowed. "I don't owe you anything either," she whispered. For the first time, something almost like interest moved behind his eyes. "No," he said. "You don't." That should have been the end of it. A humiliating dinner. A dangerous stranger. A chair pulled out in a room where Sophie had been meant to stand. But across the table, Daniel Whitmore's humiliation had turned into something darker. And Vincent Romano had not pulled that chair only because Sophie's hands were trembling. He had seen something else. When Sophie leaned over Daniel's glass, Daniel had slid a black flash drive beneath his napkin. Vincent had been watching for that flash drive for 3 months. By midnight, Sophie Lane's life had already become a weapon in a war she did not know existed. The dinner ended without dessert. No one announced it. The room simply lost its appetite. Margot complained about a headache. Daniel smiled too hard while helping her from her chair. Guests murmured into phones and exchanged glances at Sophie, as if she had transformed from waitress to scandal in under 5 minutes. Vincent did not speak again until the room was half empty. Sophie stood quickly, needing distance from him, from Daniel, from the chair that had made her feel seen in a way that terrified her. "Thank you," she said, though the words felt too small and too dangerous. Vincent rose as well, up close. He was taller than she had realized. Not bulky, not showy, but controlled in a way that made his stillness feel violent. She could see the edge of a tattoo disappearing beneath his cuff. "Will you be safe getting home?" he asked. Sophie almost laughed. Safe. The word belonged to people who had choices. "I take the late train," she said. His eyes narrowed slightly. "That wasn't an answer. It's the only one I have." Before he could respond, Daniel appeared near the private hallway, one hand tucked in his pocket. His expression polished for anyone watching, but his eyes were not polished. They were furious. "Sophie," he said. A word. Vincent's gaze shifted. Daniel's throat moved. Privately, Sophie lifted her chin. "There's nothing private left between us." A muscle tightened in Daniel's jaw. Margot stood behind him, arms folded, her diamond necklace catching light like a blade. "You embarrassed us tonight." Sophie stared at her. "I embarrassed you. You sat beside Mr. Romano like you belonged there." Vincent's voice came from beside Sophie. "She did." Margot's face hardened. Daniel lowered his voice. "Sophie, don't let one powerful man's pity confuse you. You know how this works. Tomorrow, you'll still be a waitress, and I'll still be Daniel Whitmore." There it was, the real man beneath the gold. Sophie felt something inside her go strangely calm. "You rewrite," she said. "Tomorrow, I'll still be able to look at myself." Daniel's face changed. For 1 second, pure hatred flashed through his eyes. Then he smiled. "You always were dramatic." He stepped closer and slipped something into her apron pocket so quickly she barely reacted. Sophie stiffened. "What did you just... Your final paycheck." Maybe," Daniel murmured. "After tonight, I doubt they'll keep you." Vincent moved. Not fast. Not violently. Just one step. Daniel immediately stepped back. Vincent looked at Sophie's apron pocket. "Take it out." Sophie reached in and found a folded envelope. Her name was written on it. Not in Daniel's handwriting. In hers. She frowned. Vincent's expression darkened. "Do not open that here," he said. Daniel's smile returned. "Careful. Romano. Some women come with paperwork." Vincent's eyes lifted to Daniel. "I know," he said. "So do traitors." The word chilled the hallway. Daniel's smile held, but only barely. Margot touched his arm. "Daniel, let's go." They left with the grace of people used to escaping consequences. Sophie stood frozen with the envelope in her hand. "What is this?" she asked. Vincent looked toward the hallway where Daniel had disappeared. "Leverage." "Against who?" His eyes returned to hers. "Possibly you." The employee entrance behind the kitchen smelled like rain, grease, and cigarette smoke. Sophie stood beneath the awning in her wool coat, clutching the unopened envelope. She had refused Vincent's car twice. The third time, he had stopped asking and simply walked outside with her. 2 black SUVs waited at the curb. Men stood near them with earpieces and blank faces. Sophie glanced at them. "You travel like a president." Vincent looked at the street. Presidents are easier to kill. She did not know what to say to that. The rain had turned the alley pavement silver. Manhattan hummed beyond the side street, alive and indifferent. Sophie held out the envelope. You should take it if it has something to do with you. Vincent did not reach for it. If I take it, you become involved without knowing why. She gave him a tired look. I think sitting beside you already handled that. His mouth did not smile, but something almost softened around his eyes. You re-angry. I'm humiliated. Good. Sophie blinked. Excuse me. Humiliation burns off faster than fear, he said. Anger keeps you standing. She wanted to hate that he was right. The envelope felt heavy. Daniel cheated on me, she said, surprising herself with the confession. Maybe because Vincent had already seen the wound. Maybe because strangers were sometimes safer than people who knew where all the bruises were. With Margot, he told me I was too sensitive, too insecure, too ordinary to understand his world. Then tonight he made sure I served his engagement dinner. Vincent's gaze stayed on the rain. Men like him don't humiliate women because they stopped loving them, he said. They do it because the woman survived. Sophie looked at him. There was no comfort in his voice, no warmth. But there was recognition, as if he understood survival not as a word, but as a country he had lived in too long. You don't know me, she said. No, he agreed. Then why did you do that in there? Vincent finally turned to face her. The city light caught one side of his face, leaving the other in shadow, because he wanted the room to see you as small. His gaze dropped briefly to the envelope. And because Daniel Whitmore is hiding behind you. Before Sophie could respond, the kitchen door swung open. Her manager stepped out, eyes red with panic. Sophie, he said, refusing to look at Vincent. I'm sorry, corporate called. You resuspended pending review. Sophie stared at him. Review of what? The incident with the VIP guest. Her laugh came out hollow. You mean when I sat down, he winced. It's complicated. Vincent's voice was calm enough to be terrifying. No, it isn't. The manager went pale. Sophie stepped between them before Vincent could say anything else. Don't, she said. Vincent looked down at her, and for a second the space between them felt too close. Don't what? Destroy him because I got fired. The manager flinched. Vincent studied Sophie's face, then looked back at the manager. You should leave, he said. The manager did. Sophie closed her eyes. The job had been ugly, exhausting, underpaid, but it was rent, groceries, medicine for her mother's old hospital bills, a thin rope over a deep hole. When she opened her eyes, Vincent was watching her too carefully. I don't want your money, she said before he could offer. I didn't offer. You were going to. I was considering it. At least lie politely. That almost pulled a real smile from him. Almost. Instead, he reached into his jacket and handed her a black card with only a phone number embossed in silver. If anything happens tonight, he said, call. Sophie stared at the card. Things already happened tonight. Then call when they get worse. She should have dropped it into the gutter. Instead, she took it. Not because she trusted him. Because when Vincent Romano looked into the rain-soaked alley, every man near the SUVs turned their attention outward, scanning rooftops, windows, passing cars, as if danger had already arrived. Sophie slept for 3 hours. Then the sound of breaking glass woke her. She sat upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs. Her apartment was small, 5th floor, Queens, above a bakery that started ovens at 4 in the morning. Usually the building creaked and groaned around her like an old ship. Tonight, it felt dead. Another sound came from the living room, a drawer sliding open. Sophie reached for her phone with shaking fingers. The black card sat on her nightstand, where she had thrown it before changing into sweatpants and an oversized shirt. She stared at it. Something crashed in the next room. She grabbed the card and dialed. Vincent answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" he asked. "No hello. No surprise." Sophie's throat closed. "Someone is in my apartment." A pause. Not fear. Calculation. "Lock your bedroom door. Move away from it. Stay low. I am in Queens." "You can't. I know where you are." The words should have frightened her. They did. But the footsteps outside her bedroom frightened her more. "Sophie," Vincent said, his voice lower. "Breathe quietly." The bedroom handle turned. She clamped one hand over her mouth. The lock held. A man cursed softly from the other side. Then came a hard kick. The door shook. Sophie backed toward the window. Phone pressed to her ear. Vincent's voice changed. It became something colder than winter. "Step away from that door," he said. The second kick splintered the frame. Sophie grabbed the bedside lamp. The third kick burst the door open. A masked man filled the doorway. For half a second, they stared at each other. Then the window behind Sophie exploded inward. She screamed. Black-clad men poured through the fire escape like shadows. One seized the intruder. Another disarmed him before Sophie could understand what she was seeing. The lamp fell from her hand and shattered. Vincent stepped through the broken bedroom doorway 30 seconds later. Rain on his black coat. And his face unreadable. Sophie stood barefoot among glass. Breathing so hard her chest hurt. He looked her over once. Not possessively. Not romantically. Like a man counting wounds. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. His eyes dropped to a thin red line on her palm where glass had cut her. He went still. "It's nothing," she said. Vincent crossed the room. Sophie stepped back instinctively. He stopped immediately. That mattered. She hated that it mattered. One of his men dragged the intruder into the living room. The man's mask had been ripped off. He was young, bleeding from the nose. Terrified. Vincent did not look away from Sophie. "Get your coat," he said. "You're not staying here. I can't just leave." "You can. This is my home." His voice hardened. "Not tonight." Sophie's fear flared into anger. "You don't get to walk into my life. Pull out chairs. Break through windows. And start giving orders." For the first time, Vincent looked truly dangerous. Not at her. "For hair, someone broke into your apartment 6 hours after Daniel put an envelope in your pocket," he said. "You can hate me in a safer location." Sophie stared at him. Then she looked at her living room, cushions slashed open, drawers emptied. Her mother's framed photo face down on the floor. The little ceramic bluebird Sophie had bought at a thrift store after Daniel left. Smashed under someone's boot. Her anger collapsed. Vincent saw it happen. His voice lowered. "Pack 3 things you can lose. Not clothes. Not documents. 3 things you can't lose." Sophie looked at him sharply. He knew exactly how to speak to someone whose life had been invaded. She packed her mother's photo, an old recipe notebook, and a silver bracelet her grandmother had given her. When she stepped into the hallway, Vincent's men had already cleared it. The neighbors watched through cracked doors. Sophie kept her head down. Vincent walked beside her without touching her. But every man in that hallway understood that touching Sophie Lane would be the last mistake they made. Outside, black SUVs lined the wet street. Sophie stopped. The city smelled like rain and fear. "Was Daniel trying to kill me?" she asked. Vincent looked at the broken window above. "No," he said. "He was trying to find something before the people who want me dead found it first." Sophie hugged her bag to her chest. What thing? Vincent turned to her. The envelope. The envelope contained 12 pages. Sophie sat in Vincent Romano's penthouse kitchen at 4 in the morning, while storm clouds pressed against the windows and Manhattan spread beneath her like a dark ocean of glass. His penthouse did not look like a bachelor's playground. No bright art. No messy luxury. Everything was elegant. Severe. Quiet. Black marble. Low amber lights. Shelves of old books. A piano no one seemed to play. It felt less like a home than a fortress built by a man who did not expect softness to survive near him. Vincent stood across the island while his lawyer, a silver-haired woman named Elena March, read through the documents from Daniel's envelope. Sophie had not realized she was cold until Vincent placed a cup of coffee near her. He did not ask whether she wanted it. He simply noticed her hands shaking and put warmth within reach. Elena's expression darkened as she turned another page. This is forged, she said. Sophie's stomach twisted. What is it? Elena looked at Vincent. He nodded once. Elena slid the papers towards Sophie. A confession. In your name. Sophie stared down at the pages. Her signature appeared at the bottom. Not perfect, but close. Too close. Her throat tightened as she read. I, Sophie Lane, knowingly transferred confidential shipping records obtained through unauthorized access. The words blurred. Shipping records. Romano Freight. Belandi contacts. Shell accounts. False payments. She pushed the papers away. I didn't do this. No, Vincent said. Daniel did. Sophie stood so fast the chair scraped back. Why would he forge my name? Elena answered gently. Because your old catering business still exists on paper. Sophie froze. Lane Whitmore Events. She had not spoken that name aloud in almost a year. It had been her dream once. A small private catering company. She cooked. Daniel handled investors. She built menus on the back of grocery receipts. Imagined weddings and birthdays and corporate dinners, where people tasted something she made and remembered it. Then Daniel cheated. Then bills appeared. Then accounts emptied. Then Daniel told her the company had failed because she did not understand business. Sophie gripped the counter. He said he closed it. Vincent's face was expressionless, but his eyes were not. He used it, he said, to move money between legitimate events and illegal shipping contracts. My shipping contracts. Sophie felt the floor tilt. No, Elena continued, voice steady. The confession says you accessed client information through private catering events and sold it to the Belandi family. If this were released publicly, you would look like the leak. Sophie stared at Vincent. The leak that you're hunting. Yes. Her laugh came out broken. So Daniel made me serve that dinner because he wanted you to see me. Vincent's silence confirmed it. Sophie stepped back. Everything about the dinner rearranged itself in her memory. Daniel's request. The envelope. The champagne. The humiliation. He wanted me to look bitter. She whispered. Like the rejected ex who would steal from him. From you? From anyone. Vincent's jaw tightened. Yes. Sophie pressed both hands over her mouth. For months, she had believed Daniel had only broken her heart. He had been burying her life. Vincent moved around the island, then stopped a few feet away, as if approaching her required permission. Sophie. She looked up. There was fury in his face now, but it was contained behind something harder than restraint. Men like Vincent did not explode. They became quiet enough to make other people disappear. I need to ask you something, he said. She hugged herself. Did I betray you? No. That answer came too fast to be manipulation. It unsettled her more than suspicion would have. Then what? When you served the table tonight, did anyone give you something before you entered the room? A tray? An apron? Anything different? Sophie closed her eyes. Thinking. The apron, she said. My manager said private events required a fresh one. It was folded in my locker. I thought it was strange because we usually use our own. Vincent turned to Elena. Find it. One of his men left immediately. Sophie stared at him. What was in my apron? Vincent's voice was grim. Probably the reason someone broke into your apartment. An hour later, his men found it in the restaurant laundry bin. A tiny surveillance device had been sewn into the hem. It had recorded everything from Sophie's waist, every pore, every tremble, every humiliation. Every moment, Daniel needed to make her look unstable. And when Vincent asked her to sit beside him, the camera had captured that too. By sunrise, the clip was online. Not the whole dinner. Only 26 seconds. Sophie sitting beside Vincent Romano. Daniel looking furious. Margot shocked. The caption read, Mafia, boss humiliates society here by choosing his plus-size waitress ex. By 8 in the morning, Sophie Lane was no longer anonymous. By 9, men with Belandi ties were parked outside her ruined apartment. By 10, Vincent Romano stood in his study, watching the footage without emotion, while Sophie stood behind him, feeling her life collapse one headline at a time. I need to leave, she said. Vincent paused the video. You need to stay protected. By you, yes. Because you care whether I live. Or because I'm evidence, he turned slowly. There it was. The question neither of them had wanted spoken. Vincent's face closed. At the moment, he said, you are both. The truth hurt more because he did not soften it. Sophie nodded once. Thank you for your honesty. She walked out before he could stop her. But the penthouse had elevators that required Vincent's fingerprint. Guards in every hallway. And a city below, full of people now using her name like bait. Sophie Lane had survived Daniel's cruelty by staying ordinary. Vincent Romano had made her visible. And visible women were easier to hunt. For 3 days, Sophie lived inside Vincent's penthouse like a guest, a prisoner, and a ghost. He gave her the east bedroom, the one with the soft gray walls and a view of the river. He sent clothes, but not dresses that looked like ownership. Sweaters, jeans, a coat warm enough for winter. He sent meals but did not force her to eat at his table. He had a doctor check her palm and did not enter the room while the doctor was there. Every careful boundary confused her. Dangerous men were supposed to take. Vincent seemed to spend most of his time stopping himself. She saw him through doorways, on phone calls, speaking in Italian so low, the words became blades. Men came and went. Maps appeared on the study wall. Harbor routes. Ship names. Family names Sophie had only heard in crime documentaries. Romano. Belandi. Marchetti. Val. Margot Vale's family had money in the harbor redevelopment project Daniel was trying to sell Vincent. Daniel had been promising Vincent legitimate access to waterfront properties while secretly giving the Belandi family Romano shipping schedules. A business dinner. An engagement celebration. A trap wrapped in roses. On the 4th night, Sophie found Vincent in the kitchen. Alone. Sleeves rolled to his forearms as he poured whiskey. He did not drink. The city lights carved shadows beneath his cheekbones. You don't sleep much, she said. He did not turn. Neither do you. I'm not responsible for a criminal empire. Neither am I, he said. According to my attorneys. Despite herself, Sophie let out a small laugh. Vincent looked over his shoulder. The room changed, not dramatically. Not like music swelling in a movie. Just enough. A small laugh had escaped her. And he looked at it like a man who had found light under a locked door. Sophie regretted it immediately. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said. You didn't. She walked to the island, keeping space between them. Elena said Daniel is hosting another event tomorrow. Vincent set the glass down. A charity auction. Margot's Family Foundation, yes. And you going? His eyes met hers. Yes. Sophie's pulse quickened. Were you going to tell me no? Why? Because you were going to ask to come. She folded her arms. That's arrogant. That's accurate. I can help. No. You need Daniel to expose himself. I know him. I know when he's lying. Vincent's expression hardened. This isn't a heartbreak investigation. Sophie, these men don't ruin reputations. They put bodies in rivers. She stepped closer before fear could stop her. And Daniel put my name on a confession that could destroy my life. He sent someone into my apartment. He turned me into your scapegoat without my permission. So don't stand there and tell me I'm too delicate to enter a room I've already been dragged into. Vincent stared at her. Something shifted in his face. Fascination. Not softness. Not yet. You should be afraid of me, he said quietly. I am. His eyes darkened. But I'm more afraid of letting Daniel decide who I become. The silence between them stretched. Vincent's hand rested on the counter, close enough that Sophie could see the scars across his knuckles. He noticed her looking and slowly withdrew his hand, as if hiding violence could make it less real. You attend as my guest, he said at last. Sophie's breath caught. Not as evidence. Not as bait. His gaze held hers. As mine. The word moved through her like heat and warning. I don't belong to you, she said. No, Vincent said. But tomorrow night, every man in that room needs to believe touching you means touching me. Sophie should have hated the possessiveness. Part of her did. Another part, the part still hearing Margot call her staff. Daniel call her dramatic. Guests laugh into crystal glasses, felt something dangerous unfold inside her chest. Not surrender. Recognition. What do I have to do, she asked. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Walk in, he said, and don't look down. The dress arrived in a black garment bag with no designer label visible. Sophie expected something humiliatingly tight or aggressively glamorous. Something chosen by a man who saw women as decorations. Instead, the dress was deep emerald satin with long sleeves, a soft neckline, and a waist that honored her body instead of apologizing for it. She stared at herself in the mirror for 10 minutes. Curvy, on, soft, strong, not hidden. When she stepped into the penthouse hallway, Vincent was waiting near the elevator. He looked at her once. Only once, but the silence after that look nearly broke her. His eyes moved from her face to the dress, then back to her face with such controlled intensity that Sophie felt it everywhere. You don't like it, she asked, suddenly self-conscious. Vincent's jaw flexed. I like it too much. The elevator doors opened. Neither of them moved. Then he stepped aside. During the ride down, the mirrored walls reflected them from every angle. Sophie stood beside him, close enough to smell cedar, smoke, and cold air on his coat. His hand hung at his side. Once, as the elevator jolted, his fingers almost brushed hers. Almost, he pulled away first. Sophie noticed. So did he. The charity auction was held in a restored bank building near Wall Street. All marble columns and velvet ropes. Cameras flashed outside. Society reporters gathered behind barricades. Black SUVs rolled up one after another. When Vincent stepped out, the noise dipped. When Sophie stepped out after him, it exploded. Sophie, over here are you with Vincent Romano? Is it true Daniel Whitmore framed you? Did Romano buy your silence? Sophie froze under the flashes. Then Vincent's hand touched the small of her back. Not gripping, not claiming, a single, steady point. Eyes on the door. He murmured. She obeyed. Inside. Daniel saw her from across the ballroom. The look on his face was worth every flashbulb outside. Margot stood beside him in silver, smiling until her eyes landed on Sophie's dress. Then the smile curdled. Vincent did not lead Sophie to the side of the room. He walked her straight through the center. Whispers rose like smoke. Sophie kept her chin up. Daniel intercepted them near the champagne tower. Of course he did. He could never resist a stage. Sophie, he said, voice warm for the crowd. I'm glad to see you redoing well. Vincent stopped beside her. Sophie smiled faintly. Are you Daniel? S. eyes flickered. Margot stepped forward. Lips curved. That dress is brave. Sophie looked at her calmly. So is wearing stolen jewelry in public? Margot went still. Vincent's gaze sharpened. Danielle's face lost color. Sophie had not planned to say it. She had seen the necklace from across the room and felt the past open under her feet. A delicate gold chain. A champagne-colored diamond pendant. Her grandmother's necklace. The one Daniel told her had been lost when they moved out of the shared office. Margot touched it instinctively. This, she said with a laugh. Daniel gave it to me. Sophie's voice shook. But it did not break. I know. People nearby began to listen. Daniel stepped closer. Sophie, don't do this. Do what she asked. Recognize what was mine. Vincent turned his head toward Daniel. Take it off her. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Vincent now. Margot looked offended. You cannot be serious. Vincent's gaze moved to her. I rarely repeat myself. Daniel's polished mask cracked in front of half of Manhattan's elite. Sophie should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt grief. Not for Daniel, for the woman she had been when she trusted him with keys. Accounts. Recipes. Jewelry. Dreams. Daniel reached for Margot's necklace with shaking hands. Margot slapped his hand away. Don't you dare embarrass me because of her. Vincent leaned closer to Daniel. Interesting choice of words. Daniel's eyes darted around the room, and Sophie saw it. The fear. Not shame. Not guilt. Fear. Vincent saw it too. Before either man could speak, a waiter crossed behind Margot, holding a tray of champagne. His sleeve lifted. Sophie saw the gun. She did not think. She grabbed Vincent's arm and pulled. Down. The first shot shattered the champagne tower. Glass burst across the ballroom like ice. Screams tore through the room. Vincent moved with terrifying speed, wrapping one arm around Sophie and forcing her behind a marble column as his men surged from every direction. Another shot cracked through the chandelier, raining crystal onto velvet and bloodless panic. Sophie's ears rang. Vincent's body covered hers. His face was inches away. Eyes hard. Breathing steady. Are you hit? She shook her head, unable to speak. His hand moved over her shoulder, her arm, her waist, checking with controlled urgency. I'm okay. She gasped. His eyes held hers a fraction too long. Then violence returned to the room. Vincent turned, drew a gun from beneath his jacket, and fired once. The shooter dropped behind the bar. Sophie flinched. Vincent looked back at her. And for the first time, she saw fear in him. Not fear of bullets, fear that one had touched her. It vanished almost instantly, buried beneath command. Stay behind me, he said. Daniel was crawling near the champagne tower. Margot screamed beside him, clutching the necklace at her throat. Across the ballroom, a second shooter lifted his weapon toward Vincent. Sophie saw him before anyone else. Vincent. Vincent turned. The shot hit the column where his head had been. His men fired back. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Alarms screamed. Guests sobbed under tables. Marble floors became slick with champagne and shattered glass. Vincent grabbed Sophie's hand and pulled her through a side corridor. His grip was firm now. No more careful distance. She ran with him, dress sweeping around her legs, lungs burning. They reached the service hallway. A man lunged from the shadows with a knife. Vincent slammed him into the wall so hard a framed painting fell. Sophie stumbled back. For 3 seconds, she saw exactly what Vincent Romano was. Not the man who pulled out a chair. Not the man who brought coffee. A predator built by a world where hesitation got people buried. The attacker collapsed. Vincent turned to Sophie. Breathing controlled. She stared at him. Something painful flickered across his face. "You afraid?" he said. "Yes." He nodded once, as if he had expected nothing else. Then a red stain spread beneath his sleeve. Sophie's fear changed. "You bleeding?" "It's nothing." She grabbed his arm before he could move. His body went still under her touch. "Don't to lead to me." The words came out sharper than she intended. Vincent looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. Behind them, sirens wailed closer. His voice dropped. "We need to leave." Sophie did not let go. "Then we leave. But when we get wherever we were going..." "I'm looking at that wound." A strange expression crossed his face. Almost disbelief. As if people had feared his blood, caused his blood, demanded his blood. But no one had ordered him to care for it. "Fine," he said quietly. They escaped through the rear entrance into an alley washed blue by police lights. Black SUVs roared up. Vincent pushed Sophie into the back seat and climbed in after her. As the car tore into traffic, Sophie looked through the rain-streaked window and saw Daniel standing in the ballroom doorway. Alive, furious, on, and staring at her like she had ruined everything by surviving again. The safe house was not a house. It was an old hotel on the edge of the Hudson, closed to the public and guarded like a secret. Its top floor had been converted into something between a luxury apartment and a bunker. Rain lashed the windows. The river moved black and restless below. Vincent sat on the edge of a leather chair while Sophie cleaned the wound on his arm. The bullet had grazed him. Not deep, but ugly enough to make her hands shake. Not from the blood, from the memory of him putting his body over hers. "You've done this before," he said. "My mom was a nurse." Sophie replied, "I learned enough." "You didn't mention your mother. You didn't ask." His eyes lifted to hers. The room was too quiet. Vincent had dismissed everyone except one guard outside the door. Sophie could feel the emptiness around them, intimate and dangerous. She wrapped gauze around his arm. "Daniel stole her necklace," she said after a while. "My grandmother gave it to my mother. My mother gave it to me before she died." Vincent's face hardened. "I'll get it back. I don't need you to kill anyone over a necklace." "I wasn't going to kill him over the necklace." Sophie paused. Vincent looked at her. "I was going to kill him for making you ask." Her breath caught. The words should have repelled her. Instead, they landed somewhere terrifyingly tender. She tied the bandage too tightly. Vincent did not flinch. "You can say things like that," she whispered. "Why?" "Because I spent 2 years with a man who made love sound like a favor. And now you say things like they vows, but they come wrapped in violence." Vincent's eyes did not move from her face. "I don't know another language." The honesty struck her harder than romance would have. Sophie stepped back. Vincent caught her wrist, not hard. Not to hold her prisoner, only to stop the retreat. Then he released her before she could ask. "I am not him," he said. "No," Sophie whispered. "You re-worse in ways I understand less." Something like pain crossed his eyes. She wanted to touch it. That scared her more than the gunshots. Vincent stood slowly. Now they were too close. Sophie had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. Rain crawled down the window behind him. Somewhere below, engines idled. He lifted his hand, stopped before touching her cheek. His fingers hovered in the air between them. An unfinished confession. Sophie did not move away. His eyes dropped to her mouth. Then his phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Vincent stepped back immediately. By the time he answered, his face had closed again. What he listened, then his gaze went to Sophie. Whatever softness had almost existed vanished. "Send it," he said. A moment later, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Sophie saw his expression and knew something had gone wrong. "What happened?" Vincent turned the phone toward her. A video played, Sophie and Vincent in the service corridor at the auction. His arm around her, his gun in his hand, her voice shouting his name. Then the clip cut to Sophie leaning over his wounded arm in the safe house. Recorded from inside the room. Sophie's blood chilled. "Someone is watching us," Vincent's voice turned deadly quiet. Someone was. He crossed to the bookshelf, reached behind a carved panel, and pulled out a tiny black device. A camera, hidden in Vincent Romano's safe house. For the first time since Sophie had met him, Vincent looked shaken. Not because someone had invaded his fortress. Because Sophie had been inside it. He crushed the camera in his hand. "Who has access to this place?" Sophie asked. Vincent did not answer. He did not need to. Betrayal inside his own circle. The next morning, Sophie heard Vincent arguing behind the study door. She had not meant to listen. But her name stopped her in the hallway. "Keep her close until Daniel moves," Vincent said. Another voice, Elena S., answered. "She already thinks she's evidence." "She is evidence." Sophie's chest tightened. Elena said something too low to hear. Vincent's reply came colder. "Feelings don't change strategy." Sophie stepped back. There it was. The sentence Daniel would have loved. Not because Vincent meant it the same way. Because pain rarely cared about context. Sophie returned to her room and closed the door without a sound. An hour later, she was gone. Not through the elevator. Through the old service stairs she had noticed the night before. The ones used by kitchen staff when the hotel was still open. One guard saw her and tried to stop her. She told him she needed air and that Vincent could put her in a room. But he could not put her back inside herself. The guard hesitated. That was enough. By the time Vincent realized she had left, Sophie was already in a cab crossing into Queens. She knew it was foolish. She knew Daniel was dangerous. She knew Vincent would be furious. But if she stayed one more hour inside, a place where men discussed her like evidence, bait, protection, strategy, she would forget the woman she had been before they all started deciding what she was worth. She went to the only place Daniel would never think to look. A small church basement in Astoria, where her mother's old friend, Mrs. Alvarez, ran a soup kitchen twice a week. Sophie helped chop carrots until her hands stopped shaking. For 2 hours. No one called her scandal. Bait. Mistress. Waitress X. Or Romano S. woman. She was just Sophie. Then Daniel walked in. He wore a dark coat. No entourage. No Margot. His hair was damp from rain. His smile looked tired. Almost human. That frightened her more than his cruelty. Mrs. Alvarez was in the pantry. Sophie gripped the knife in her hand. Daniel lifted both palms. I'm not here to hurt you. You already did. His face tightened. I know. Sophie stared at him. The apology was too late. Worse, it was practiced. I need you to listen, Daniel said. Romano is using you. Funny, he said the same thing about you. Daniel stepped closer. He pulled you out of that dinner because he needed leverage. He brought you to the auction because he needed Daniel Whitmore to panic. He kept you close because you're the face of the confession. Ask yourself, Sophie, why would a man like Vincent Romano care about you? The words hit their mark because Sophie had already asked herself the same question. Daniel saw it. He doesn't choose women like us, he said softly. Us, as if they were still connected, as if he had not traded her for diamonds and influence. He chose you because you were useful. Sophie's voice came out steady. And why did you choose me tonight? Daniel's eyes flickered toward the basement door. Too late. Two men entered behind him. Sophie stepped back. Knife raised. Daniel's expression shifted into regret, so shallow it could not hold water. I'm sorry, he said. One of the men grabbed her from behind. Sophie fought. She slammed her elbow back, kicked a chair over, screamed for Mrs. Alvarez. A hand clamped over her mouth. The knife clattered to the floor. Daniel looked away. Coward, she thought as they dragged her out. Not monster. Coward. That was somehow worse. They took her to the harbor. Fog rolled over the water in thick silver sheets. Warehouses stood abandoned along the pier, their windows broken, their walls painted with old company names. Across the river, Manhattan glittered like another life. Inside one warehouse, Margot Vale waited in a white coat. Sophie's grandmother's necklace still at her throat. You know, Margot said, I preferred you when you were crying with champagne. Sophie's wrists were tied to a chair. Her mouth tasted like blood where she had bitten her lip. Daniel stood near a table covered with documents. A laptop played the edited video from the auction on mute. You need to sign, Daniel said. Sophie looked at the papers. A full confession. Her name, her forged guilt made official. No, Margot laughed. Still pretending you have options. Sophie looked at Daniel. Did you ever love me? His face changed. For one painful second. She saw the younger man, the one who ate burnt pancakes in her tiny kitchen and kissed flour from her cheek, the one who said they would build something honest. Then he vanished. I loved who I thought I'd become with you, he said. Sophie nodded slowly. That means no. Daniel flinched. Good. Margot stepped forward and grabbed Sophie's chin. You think Romano is coming for you because you're special, she hissed. He is coming because this confession can start a war. You are a matchstick. Sweetheart, nothing more. Sophie met her eyes. Then why are you so scared I won't burn? Margot slapped her. Sophie's head snapped sideways. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Sophie laughed once. Breathless and bitter. There he is, she whispered. The man who can ruin a woman's life, but can watch her bleed. Daniel's face twisted. Sign the papers. No. Margot turned to one of the men near the door. Call Belandi. Tell him Romano-esque girl is ready. Romano-esque girl. Sophie hated the phrase. Loved it. Feared it. All at once. Outside. Engines rumbled. Not one. Many. The warehouse windows filled with white headlights. Margot went still. Daniel cursed under his breath. The metal doors at the far end of the warehouse groaned open. Fog spilled in first. Then Vincent Romano walked through it. Black coat. Bloodless face. Eyes like judgment. Behind him came men with guns lowered but ready. Black SUVs lined the pier beyond him, their headlights cutting through the fog like a wall of fire. Vincent did not look at Daniel. He looked at Sophie. His gaze moved over her tied wrists, her split lip, the red mark on her cheek. Something ancient and merciless woke in his face. Sophie's heart pounded. "Vincent," Daniel said quickly, "this isn't what it looks like." Vincent's voice was quiet. "It never is with cowards." Margot grabbed Sophie's hair and pressed a gun to her head. Everything stopped. Vincent did not move, but the temperature of the room seemed to drop. Margot smiled. "Wild now. Take one more step and she dies." Sophie's breath caught. Vincent's eyes stayed on hers. Not on the gun. On here. "Look at me," he said. Sophie swallowed. Margot dug the gun harder against her temple. Vincent's voice remained steady. "Only at me." Tears burned Sophie's eyes. But she obeyed. Daniel was speaking fast, trying to negotiate. Margot was threatening. Vincent's men were shifting like wolves at the edge of command. But Sophie looked only at Vincent. In his eyes, she saw rage. Worse than rage. She saw fear. Not the fear of losing control, the fear of losing her. And suddenly she understood. Whatever she had overheard in the study had been true. She was evidence. She was strategy. But she had also become the place where Vincent Romano's control began to fail. Margot's hand trembled. Sophie felt it. Daniel saw it too. He stepped toward Margot. "Careful." Margot snapped. "Shut up." The gun shifted. 1 inch. Sophie moved. She threw her weight sideways, dragging the chair with her. The gun fired into the ceiling. Vincent's men surged. Margot screamed. Daniel lunged for the documents. Vincent crossed the warehouse like a storm. He reached Sophie first, cutting the rope from her wrists with a knife pulled from inside his coat. A shot rang out. Vincent's body jerked. Sophie screamed. He had turned at the last second, putting himself between her and the man near the loading dock. Vincent fired once. The man dropped. Then Vincent staggered. Sophie caught him with both hands. Though he was too heavy, too strong, too impossible to fall. "Vincent, I'm fine," he said through clenched teeth. "Stop saying that." He looked down at her. And even wounded, even surrounded by enemies, something almost tender touched his mouth. "There she is." She pressed her hands to his side where blood darkened his shirt. "Don't you dare make jokes now." "I wasn't joking." Across the warehouse, Daniel was on his knees. Vincent's men surrounding him. Margot was screaming as Elena March entered with 2 federal agents Sophie had never seen before. Vincent had not come only with guns. He had come with proof. Elena lifted the laptop from the table. Daniel Whitmore, Margot Vale, and every account tied to Lane Whitmore events are now federal evidence. Daniel stared at Sophie. His face emptied of charm. "You don't understand," he said. "I had no choice." Sophie looked at him from beside Vincent. For once, Daniel was the one kneeling. For once, Sophie was the one standing. "No," she said. "You had choices. You just kept choosing yourself." Margot's necklace had broken during the struggle. The champagne diamond pendant lay on the concrete near Sophia's foot. Sophie picked it up. Her hands were shaking. Vincent watched her. One hand pressed to his wound. "You got it back," he said. She looked at him, tears slipping free now. "So did you." His eyes softened. Then his knees buckled. The hospital Vincent owned did not look like a hospital. It looked like a hotel built for billionaires who feared death but expected luxury while avoiding it. Private floors, silent nurses, guards at every elevator. Snow began falling over Manhattan sometime before dawn, turning the city soft beyond the windows. Vincent survived because men like him seemed too stubborn for death. At least that was what Sophie told herself while sitting beside his hospital bed, wearing borrowed clothes and holding her grandmother's necklace in her fist. He woke near sunrise. His eyes opened slowly, then found her. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough. Sophie wiped her face quickly. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm not used to it." The words were quiet enough to hurt. She looked at him, at the bandage beneath his hospital gown, at the bruises on his knuckles, at the man who had brought war to a warehouse because she was inside it. "I heard you," she said. His eyes sharpened slightly. "At the safe house, you said feelings don't change strategy." Vincent looked toward the window. "Yes." Sophie waited. He did not hide. He did not defend himself. "Finally," he said, "I have buried people because I let emotion change strategy. I learned to separate what I want from what keeps people alive." "And what am I?" His gaze returned to hers. For the first time, Vincent Romano looked uncertain. Not weak. Never weak. But stripped of the answer that power usually gave him. At first he said, "A witness." Sophie's chest tightened. "Then a problem." He continued. "Then a woman who looked at me like I was still a man. Even after seeing what I am." Her throat ached. And now Vincent lifted his hand slowly. He stopped before touching her. Always that last inch. Always the war between want and restraint. "Now you are the reason I was afraid in that warehouse." Sophie looked at his hand. Then she placed hers in it. His fingers closed around her like he had been drowning quietly for years. "I'm still afraid of you," she whispered. "I know. I don't want to be owned. I know. I don't want to be rescued and then put in a prettier cage." His thumb moved once over her knuckles. "I know." She studied him. "Do you?" Vincent's eyes held hers. "When you leave," he said, each word controlled with visible effort, "you will leave with your name cleared. Your business restored. Daniel's accounts frozen. And every door open that he tried to close. If you never want to see me again, no one will stop you." Sophie believed him. That was the most frightening part. "And if I do want to see you again," the machine beside him beeped steadily. Vincent's gaze dropped to her mouth. "Then I will try," he said, voice low. "To deserve the chair beside you." Sophie laughed softly through tears. "You make everything sound like a threat." "It usually is." "Vincent." His eyes returned to hers. She leaned closer. Not enough to kiss him, but enough that his breathing changed. "I don't need you, gentle," she whispered. "I need you honest." Something broke in his face. "Not control. Loneliness. I want you," he said. "Not because Daniel wanted to use you. Not because Belandi tried to take you. Not because the city is watching. I want you because when you were humiliated in a room full of people, you still had enough dignity to tell me you owed me nothing." His hand tightened around hers. "And because when you were terrified, you still fought?" Sophie closed her eyes. The confession entered her slowly, like warmth returning to frozen fingers. She did not kiss him that morning. She stayed. That was more dangerous. Daniel Whitmore's arrest became a scandal that swallowed the city for weeks. The headlines changed. At first, they called Sophie a waitress mistress, a mafia distraction, a curvy Cinderella pulled into a criminal fairy tale. Then Elena released the documents. Forged signatures, shell companies, hidden transfers, surveillance footage from the apron, bank records proving Daniel had kept Lane Whitmore events open without Sophie's knowledge. A video leaked from the engagement dinner, not the edited clip, but the entire scene. Daniel mocking her, Margot humiliating her, Vincent pulling out the chair. The internet chose sides within hours. For once, Public cruelty turned against the people who had enjoyed it. Margot's family foundation collapsed under investigation. Daniel's father resigned from 3 boards. Bolandi men disappeared from the harbor like rats before floodwater. Sophie did not watch most of it. She returned to her apartment only once, with Vincent's men outside and Mrs. Bob Alvarez beside her. She packed what survived. The bakery downstairs gave her warm bread for free. Her neighbors apologized for watching through doors and doing nothing. Sophie understood. Fear made cowards of ordinary people too. The difference was what they did afterward. A month later, she stood in front of a small storefront in Brooklyn with paper over the windows and keys in her hand. The sign above the door had been freshly painted. Lane Kitchen. Not Lane Whitmore. Never again. Vincent stood beside her in a black overcoat. Still recovering. Still too pale. Still pretending pain was an inconvenience for weaker men. Sophie looked at the keys. I told you I didn't want your money. And I told you it wasn't mine. She gave him a look. His mouth almost curved. The property was purchased through funds recovered from Daniel's accounts. Elena structured it as restitution. You own it outright. Sophie blinked hard. A restaurant. Not grand. Not society. Not a jeweled room built above Manhattan. A warm storefront with brick walls. A tiny garden space in back. And enough kitchen light to make her mother's recipe notebook feel alive again. You did all this without asking me. Vincent's expression shifted. No, he said. I prepared the option without asking you. You can refuse it. She looked at him for a long moment. You relearning. I am suffering. She smiled. He watched that smile like it was worth more than the harbor. Inside, the place smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight poured through uncovered windows. The floors needed polishing. The kitchen needed work. The dining room held only 1 table and 2 chairs. Sophie walked to the table and touched the back of 1 chair. Memory moved through her. Aurelia room. Champagne. Laughter. Daniel's cruelty. Vincent pulling out the chair beside him. You know, she said softly, that night, when you told me to sit, I thought you were saving me from them. Vincent stood near the door, giving her space. I was. She turned to him. But you also made me visible. His face tightened. I know. I hated you for that. I know. She looked around the empty restaurant. Now I think maybe I had spent too long trying to disappear from people who wanted me small. Vincent said nothing. Sophie pulled out 1 chair. Then the other. She sat. Vincent watched her. For a man feared by half the East Coast, he looked strangely hesitant in that sunlit room. Sophie nodded to the chair beside her. Sit. His eyes darkened. Slowly. Vincent Romano crossed the room. He sat beside her, not at the head of the table, not across from her like a deal. Beside her, for a while, they simply looked at the empty restaurant together. Then Sophie reached into her coat and took out her grandmother's necklace. The champagne diamond had been reset. The broken chain repaired. She placed it on the table between them. My mother used to say a table tells the truth about people. She said, some people sit to be served. Some sit to be seen. Some sit because they don't know where else to go. Vincent looked at her. And you, Sophie smiled faintly. I think I'm done serving people who never deserve me. His eyes softened with memory. Then she picked up the necklace and held it out. Help me. Vincent took it as carefully as if she had handed him something sacred. Sophie turned, lifting her hair. His fingers brushed the back of her neck as he fastened the clasp. The touch was light, barely there. It still sent warmth through her entire body. When she faced him again, he was closer than before. No trapping her. Waiting. The winter sun filled the room. Outside, Brooklyn traffic moved on, unaware that a woman who had been humiliated with a champagne tray was sitting inside the first real dream that belonged only to her. Vincent's gaze searched her face. "I still don't know how to be gentle," he said. Sophie leaned closer. "Then start with honest." His hand rose to her cheek. This time, he did not stop. His touch was warm, careful, and trembling so slightly she might have missed it if she had not already learned that Vincent Romano hid earthquakes under silence. "I am dangerously in love with you," he said. Sophie's breath caught. There was no poetry in it, no softness to make it safe. Just truth. Dark, beautiful, terrifying, earned. She touched his wrist. "I know." His eyes searched hers, and Sophie smiled through the ache in her chest. "And I'm still here." Vincent closed the last inch between them. The kiss was not gentle at first. It was restrained, then breaking. A man who had survived by never needing anyone learning the shape of devotion against her mouth. Sophie kissed him back with every part of herself Daniel had tried to shame, bury, and you. Not because Vincent saved her, because he had seen her when she was meant to be invisible, and because, in the end, he had not asked her to stand behind him. He had learned to sit beside her. Months later, on the opening night of Lane Kitchen, there were no chandeliers, no champagne towers, no cruel guests waiting to laugh. There were small candles on wooden tables, music low in the background, and a line outside that wrapped halfway down the block. "Mrs. Alvarez cried over the soup. Elena brought flowers. Vincent's men stood awkwardly near the door, pretending not to enjoy the food. And at the last table near the window, Vincent Romano sat quietly while Sophie moved through the room in a deep green dress, laughing with customers, greeting neighbors, carrying plates because she wanted to, not because anyone had power over her. A reporter outside shouted questions about Daniel's sentencing. Sophie ignored them. Another asked Vincent if he had bought the restaurant for his girlfriend. Vincent looked through the window at Sophie. "No," he said. The cameras flashed. She built it from what they failed to destroy. Inside, Sophie heard him. Her eyes met his through the glass. For a moment, the noise fell away. There was only the memory of a tray trembling in her hands, a room waiting for her to break, and a dangerous man pulling out a chair as if the entire world had been wrong about where she belonged. Vincent entered after the reporters left. The restaurant was closing. The candles had burned low. Snow drifted softly beyond the windows. Sophie stood by the last table, exhausted and radiant. Vincent approached her with the same quiet intensity that had once terrified her. "You should sit," he said. She lifted an eyebrow. "Are you giving orders in my restaurant?" "No." He pulled out the chair beside him. "I'm asking." Sophie looked at the chair, then at him. Slowly, she sat. Vincent sat beside her. Outside, black SUVs waited under falling snow. Somewhere in the city, enemies still whispered his name with fear. The Romano world remained dangerous, shadowed, unfinished. But inside Lane Kitchen, Sophie rested her head briefly against Vincent's shoulder. His hand found hers beneath the table. No audience, no performance, no humiliation. Only the quiet miracle of being chosen without being owned. Vincent turned his face slightly toward her hair. "Tell me something true," he murmured. Sophie closed her eyes. "I thought that night would be the worst night of my life." His thumb moved slowly over her hand. And now, she opened her eyes to the candlelit room, to the kitchen that belonged to her, to the man beside her who had learned that love was not possession, but presence. "Now," she whispered, I think it was the night I stopped standing, where they told me to stand. Vincent pressed a kiss to her temple. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, Sophie Lane sat beside the most feared man in the city and felt, for the first time in years, completely unafraid of being seen. And Vincent Romano, who had once believed power meant never needing anyone, held her hand like devotion, was the only empire he still wanted to keep.